You're sitting with people you know. The conversation is moving along. One person talks, and the group reacts. Another person jumps in, and everyone leans closer. Then you say something. It's not random. It's not off topic. And the conversation just keeps going, like you never spoke. No pause, no reaction, no disagreement. It hits right away. Not as anger, not even as confusion. It's quieter than that, like being wiped from the room for a second. Most people assume this happens because of what they said. They replay it in their head, wondering if they sounded boring, unsure, or awkward. But that's not what's happening. What's actually going on is older than that. It's automatic, and it's far more intentional than it looks. Being ignored in a group isn't random. It's a kind of social enforcement. Groups don't run on fairness. They run on hierarchy. And hierarchy is held together by attention. Attention is how social power moves around. When someone speaks, and the group responds, they're being given status. When someone speaks and nothing happens, that status is being withheld. And that withholding isn't passive, it's active. It's a line being drawn in the moment. The person who's ignored feels it as rejection. But the group doesn't feel like they're rejecting anyone. To them, it feels normal. It feels like the conversation is just going where it's supposed to go. That's the mechanism. Ignoring someone doesn't take cruelty. It only takes protecting what's already in place. People don't ignore you because they dislike you. They ignore you because acknowledging you would change the balance. And groups resist that without thinking about it. Think about a meeting at work. Someone in the middle of the ladder shares an idea. The room stays quiet. No reaction. A few minutes later, someone higher up says almost the same thing. Heads nod. People engage. The person who spoke first notices, but they don't point it out. Saying something would make them look needy, so they let it go. And the pattern keeps repeating. Or picture a dinner table with friends. One person just got back from traveling. Another got a promotion. Someone else is in a new relationship. They carry the energy of the room. When they talk, people ask more questions. When someone without recent momentum speaks, someone whose life feels steady and uneventful, the response is brief, polite. Then the conversation moves on. It's not that what they said matters less, it's that the group has already chosen who gets amplified. And once that choice is made, even without anyone realizing it, it's hard to undo. On the surface, being ignored feels like chance. You tell yourself it was the timing, that you spoke at the wrong moment, that you didn't speak up enough, that you misread the room. And sometimes that's true, but most of the time it isn't about the moment at all. It's about where you sit on the group's invisible map. Every group has one. No one writes it down. No one talks about it out loud. But everyone senses it. Some people are near the center. Others stay closer to the edges. And the ones on the edges aren't ignored because they're unpleasant. They're ignored because the group has already decided where its attention goes. When you're peripheral, your words carry less weight, not because they're wrong, but because the group doesn't expect them to matter. And when something isn't expected to matter, it doesn't get processed. It moves right through the room like background noise. The person who ignores you isn't thinking, I'm choosing to ignore this. They aren't thinking anything at all. That's what makes it work. Direct exclusion can be challenged. Unconscious exclusion can't. The group passes over you because acknowledging you would take effort. It would mean adjusting the flow, making room, rethinking who gets to speak and who gets listened to. And most people, most of the time, don't want to do that. So they don't. They let your words land nowhere and keep going. And because no one reacts, the silence starts to feel normal. One person's lack of response spreads. It becomes collective, and you're left with the sense that you were never there. But this is the part most people miss. The person ignoring you isn't the one with power. They're the one complying. They're following rules that were never said out loud. The real power belongs to whoever the group has decided to protect. You see this in families. One sibling becomes the favorite early on, and that role sticks, even when their behavior gets worse over time. When they speak, people listen. When you speak, attention drifts. Phones come out. It isn't about who's smarter or more interesting. It's about a pattern that formed years ago and hardened into reflex. You see it in friend groups too. One person slowly becomes the center, not by force, but by repetition. They decide where everyone goes, what things mean, how situations should be read, and eventually everyone defers without noticing. When someone else tries to take the lead, the group doesn't argue. They just don't follow. And after a while, that person stops trying. You see the same thing in relationships. One person's feelings are treated as real, the others are brushed off as overreacting. Most of the time, it isn't done on purpose. It's just that one person's emotions have been acknowledged so often that they feel valid by default, and the others have been overlooked so many times that they start to feel exaggerated. After a while, the ignored person starts agreeing with the group. They begin to think maybe they are too much, maybe they do talk too often, maybe it's better to stay quiet. And that's where this turns risky. When you're ignored again and again, something inside you changes. At first you push harder, you speak up more, you add more to the conversation, you look for the right moment to jump in. But groups don't reward effort, they reward alignment. And trying too hard signals the opposite. It signals that you're not in sync, that you're outside the rhythm. So eventually you pull back, you talk less, you watch instead of joining in. And this is the trap. Once you go quiet, the group reads that silence as evidence that you were never that invested in the first place. They don't see their role in it. They assume you drifted away on your own. And maybe you did. But not because you wanted to, because you were worn down. Someone who's ignored long enough starts absorbing the group's judgment. They begin to see themselves as less interesting, less relevant, less worth hearing. And that belief doesn't stay contained. It follows them. It shows up in other rooms with different people. They pause more before speaking. They doubt themselves more. They assume before saying anything that it won't land. That isn't paranoia, it's learned pattern. And the pattern exists. What makes this dynamic so powerful is that it doesn't require confrontation. No one ever has to say, "You don't matter." They just have to behave like it. And because nothing is said, there's nothing to argue against. You can't challenge silence. If you bring it up, if you ask why no one responds when you speak, you'll be told you're reading too much into it. You'll be told you're being sensitive. Maybe someone will include you for a moment or two. But the structure stays the same, because that structure isn't built on malice. It's built on comfort, and changing it would disrupt that comfort. So it doesn't change. When you're being ignored, the instinct is to push your way in, to prove you belong, to make yourself visible. But that almost never works. The harder you try, the clearer it becomes that you're not central. People at the center don't have to force anything. If anything works at all, it's distance, not disappearing. Distance. You stay there, you pay attention, but you stop performing. You stop waiting to be acknowledged. You stop tying your sense of worth to whether the group responds. That doesn't change the group. They may keep ignoring you, or they may not. But it changes something else. It repairs the part of you that was starting to think the silence meant something about your value. It doesn't. A group's attention isn't a measure of truth. It's a measure of alignment. And alignment isn't the same thing as worth. Some people leave a group and realize months later that no one checked in. Not because anyone disliked them, but because their absence wasn't registered. That's how far to the edge they had drifted. Some people stay in the same group for years, waiting to be noticed, waiting for the moment they'll finally be seen. And it never happens. Because the group's structure was set long before, and they were never placed at the center of it. Others see the pattern early. They recognize that the group isn't built to include them, and instead of struggling against it, they step away. Quietly, without conflict. They move on to other rooms, other people, other dynamics, where they're not peripheral. That isn't resentment, it's clarity. Almost everyone goes through this at some point. Not everyone understands what's happening. Some turn it inward, some turn it outward. But the ones who come through without losing themselves are the ones who see that being ignored isn't a comment on their substance. It's a reflection of the group's need for order. Groups aren't designed to be fair. They're designed to be stable. And stability means some people carry more weight than others. When you're the one carrying less, there are two paths. One is spending years trying to earn more weight. The other is no longer waiting for the group to assign it to you. The second path is harder, because it means trusting your own sense of reality over the silence around you. Most people aren't used to doing that, and then at some point you'll find yourself in a different room with different people, and it will happen again. Someone will overlook you, or they won't, and you'll notice what happens inside you, whether you pull back, whether you push forward, whether you wait, and in that reaction, you'll see exactly how much of this you've understood.